My husband, the CEO, humiliated me in front of his entire executive team at the company retreat on Friday night. By Monday evening, I walked into our apartment with documents showing I now owned 61% of his firm, and proof that his VP had been siphoning millions while he was too busy protecting his image to notice. Turns out, the only embarrassment was him. "Have you calmed down yet, Clara?" Archer's voice through the phone was so smooth, so practiced, like he was addressing a difficult client instead of his wife of 6 years. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're a subscriber, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." I actually had to pull the phone away from my ear and stare at it, just to make sure this was really happening. Calmed down. Like I was the problem. Like I was some hysterical woman who'd overreacted at the mountain resort instead of a CFO who'd been publicly humiliated in front of 40 executives, board members, and investors. It had been exactly 3 days since the retreat incident. 3 days since my husband stood up during the cocktail reception at Cascade Ridge Lodge and made a joke about his wife who doesn't understand the difference between a company event and a PDA meeting. 3 days since the entire room had laughed while I stood there in my carefully chosen dress, holding a glass of wine that suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I looked down at my kitchen island, our kitchen island, though not for much longer. Spread across the marble surface were 3 things: divorce papers that my attorney had drawn up in record time, my laptop showing a forensic analysis of $4.7 million in fraudulent transactions I'd uncovered over the weekend, and the stock transfer documents that would make me the majority shareholder of Harlan Technologies by morning. "Actually, Archer," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I'm perfectly calm. Why don't you come home? We should talk." The pause on the other end told me everything. He hadn't expected that. He'd expected tears, apologies, maybe a promise to do better at the next corporate function. He'd probably spent the drive back from the retreat rehearsing this conversation, maybe even running it by Kevin Abernathy, his VP of operations and best friend since college. The same Kevin who'd been the loudest to laugh at that joke. "I'm glad you're being reasonable about this," Archer finally said. I could hear the relief in his voice, the assumption that I'd learned my place. "I'll be there at 7. And Clara? I hope you understand why I had to say what I said. These things matter in business. These things matter." I hung up and looked at my dog, Pepper, a 3-year-old border collie who'd been watching me with those 2 knowing eyes from her bed by the window. She'd been extra clingy since I'd come home from the retreat Friday night, following me from room to room like she could sense the tectonic shift happening in my life. "He thinks I'm going to apologize," I told her. She tilted her head, one ear up, one ear down. "He actually thinks I spent the last 3 days reflecting on my behavior." What I'd actually spent the last 3 days doing was something else entirely. I'd spent them pulling every financial thread I'd been too trusting to pull before. Every suspicious vendor payment I'd noticed and dismissed. Every consulting fee that seemed slightly inflated. Every expense report from Kevin that I'd approved because Archer said his best friend was taking care of the expansion deals. And what I'd found was beautiful in its audacity and terrifying in its implications. Kevin Abernathy, Archer's college roommate, his trusted VP, his golf buddy, and the man who'd stood up as best man at our wedding, had been systematically stealing from Harlan Technologies for at least 2 years. Maybe longer. Shell companies with names designed to sound legitimate. Evergreen Solutions. Summit Strategic Consulting. Pacific Rim Advisory Group. All of them traced back to accounts that Kevin controlled. All of them billing us monthly for services that didn't exist. $4.7 million over 26 months. And Archer had approved every single payment without question because Kevin was family. Because you trust family. Because brotherhood means never questioning the numbers. I walked to our living room window, the penthouse apartment in downtown Portland with views of Mount Hood on clear days. Archer had insisted on this place 3 years ago when the Series B funding came through. "We need to look successful to be successful," he'd said. I'd wanted something smaller, something that didn't require a mortgage that made my CFO brain scream in protest. But appearances mattered to him. The apartment itself was a museum of Archer's carefully curated success story. The Wall Street Journal feature from last year, framed and mounted. His Forbes 30 Under 30 plaque from 5 years ago, still prominently displayed even though he was 34 now. The photos from tech conferences where he stood next to people more famous than him, their arms around his shoulders like they were old friends instead of strangers who'd posed for a photo op. My contributions to the company were here too, if you knew where to look. The financial projections I'd built that had secured our first round of funding. The cost-cutting measures I'd implemented that had kept us profitable when half our competitors were hemorrhaging cash. The vendor relationships I'd negotiated that had saved us hundreds of thousands. But those documents were in folders on shelves. Not framed on walls. The wedding photo on the side table caught my eye. 6 years ago at a winery in Willamette Valley. Archer in his custom suit, me in my carefully budgeted dress, both of us grinning like we'd just won the lottery. In a way, we had. We'd just closed our first major contract, and the future had felt limitless. His vows had promised partnership. Mine had promised loyalty. Funny how those words meant different things now. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother, "Sunday dinner still on? Haven't seen you in 3 weeks. Archer coming?" 3 weeks of excuses. 3 weeks of, the company needs him, and we're in a critical growth phase. 3 weeks of eating my mother's pot roast alone while explaining that my husband was just busy, not absent. Not prioritizing everything except his marriage. My laptop chimed with an incoming email. The subject line made me smile for the first time in 3 days. Analysis complete, Dalton. Richard Dalton, my former professor from Portland State's business school and now a forensic accountant who'd helped the FBI take down 2 major embezzlement cases, had spent the weekend verifying what I'd found. His email was brief. "Clara, everything checks out. This is textbook fraud. The pattern suggests someone who knew exactly how your approval processes worked from the inside. Call me when you're ready to proceed. RD. Knew exactly how our approval processes worked. Of course Kevin did. He'd helped design them." I opened the second email, this one from Patricia Vance, the attorney my college roommate had recommended when I'd called her in tears Saturday morning. Patricia's firm specialized in high-net-worth divorces, and her email was even more satisfying than Richard's. "Stock purchase agreement is ready. Your pre-existing shares, 12%, plus the acquisition of disputed shares from the Kristoff Family Trust, 49%, gives you 61% controlling interest. Archer's signature required by midnight tonight per trust dissolution terms, or default clause triggers. He has no idea about the trust provisions. See you at 6:30 p.m. PV. The Kristoff Family Trust. Archer's late mother's family money, tied up in company shares that Archer had always treated as his personal safety net. What he didn't know, what he'd never bothered to read in the trust documents because lawyers handle that stuff, was that the trust had a dissolution clause. If certain conditions were met, the shares could be purchased by any board member at a predetermined price. Conditions like evidence of executive malfeasance, failure to prevent fiduciary breach, or gross negligence in financial oversight. Kevin's fraud met all 3 criteria. And I was a board member. CFO with a board seat, a detail Archer had agreed to 6 years ago when we were in this together. I checked the time. 4:15 p.m. 2 hours and 45 minutes until Archer walked through that door expecting an apology. Instead, he was going to get the education of his lifetime. 8 years ago, Archer Harlan walked into the brewery where I was bartending and asked about the financial projections on my laptop. Not in a condescending way, in a genuinely curious way. And when I'd explained the 3-year model I was building for a class project, he'd listened like I was saying something important. "You actually understand money," he'd said. "Not just how to spend it. How it moves. How it grows." 3 weeks later, he'd offered me a job. 3 months after that, we were dating. 6 months in, I was his CFO and girlfriend. A year after that night, we were engaged. Those early days were insane. Archer's office was 400 square feet in southeast Portland that smelled like old pizza and broken dreams. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. We had 4 employees, 2 computers that kept crashing, and a business model that was 60% brilliant and 40% completely unworkable. I fixed the 40%. We'd work until 2 a.m., wake up at 6, and start again. I handled every invoice, every payment, every negotiation with vendors who wanted cash up front because we looked like we'd fold in a month. Archer coded. I made sure we could afford to keep the lights on while he did it. Our first major pitch was to a VC firm in Seattle. We drove up in my 1998 Honda Civic and I'd worn a blazer from Goodwill that almost fit. When the partners started asking about financials, unit economics, and burn rate, Archer had looked at me. And I'd known every answer. We'd walked out with $800,000 in seed funding. That night, in a cheap hotel room, Archer had pulled out a ring. Not expensive, a simple silver band with a tiny diamond. I can't do this without you, he'd said. Not the company. Not any of it. You're not just my CFO. You're my partner. In everything. I'd said yes before he finished the question. The wedding was small. We got married at a winery in Willamette Valley that gave us a discount because I'd helped them restructure their debt. We were happy. God, we were happy. The company grew fast. Archer's platform, supply chain optimization software for manufacturers, was solving a real problem. By year 2, we had 15 employees and were profitable. By year 3, we were hiring faster than I could process paperwork. That's when Kevin Abernathy appeared. Archer's college roommate who'd been backpacking through Europe while we were building the company. He'd bounced between 3 startups, never lasting more than a year anywhere, but Archer saw it as gaining diverse experience. Kevin gets people, Archer had said when he insisted on hiring him as VP of operations. He's got connections. He can help us scale. I'd had reservations. Kevin's resume was impressive on paper but thin on accomplishments. And something about the way he'd looked around our new office had made my skin prickle. Like he was appraising everything, calculating its worth. But Archer had been adamant. He's family, Clara. And family shows up for each other. So Kevin got the job, $180,000 salary plus equity. A corner office. An expense account. And access to everything. The first year with Kevin was fine. He did bring in connections. We signed 3 major contracts that Kevin claimed credit for, though I'd noticed I'd done most of the actual negotiation work after his introductions. By year 5, we'd raised a Series B round, $12 million from investors who believed in Archer's vision and my financial management. That's when we moved into the penthouse. When Archer started wearing custom suits and attending conferences across the country. When Sunday dinners with my parents became sporadic. When we slowly became Archer's company, in news articles and press releases. I'd noticed, of course. But I'd told myself it was just the natural evolution of a growing company. Archer was the visionary, the face of the brand. I was the numbers person, the back office. That's how tech companies worked, right? Except I wasn't just the numbers person. I was the reason the numbers worked. I'd built our financial infrastructure from scratch. I'd negotiated contracts that saved us millions. I'd kept us profitable when competitors were burning through cash and folding. I'd made the hard calls about budget cuts when Archer wanted to spend money we didn't have. But at conferences, I was Archer's wife. At investor meetings, I sat quietly while Archer presented the vision I'd made financially viable. At the company holiday party last year, someone had actually asked me what it was like being married to a genius. I'd smiled and said it was wonderful. I should have said, I wouldn't know. My phone timer went off. 5:30 p.m. 90 minutes until Archer arrived. Pepper whined at my feet. I scratched behind her ears, looking around this apartment that had never quite felt like home. All of Archer's achievements on the walls. All of his choices in the furniture. The only thing that was truly mine was Pepper. small rebellions. That's what my marriage had become. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo album. There was a picture from 4 years ago at the old office. Me at my desk, Archer behind me, both of us laughing at something on my computer screen. His hand on my shoulder. You could see the trust in that photo. The partnership. When had that died? Maybe it happened the day Archer stopped asking my opinion before making decisions. Or the day he told an interviewer his secret to success was trusting his gut without mentioning my financial models. Or the night he came home and casually mentioned he'd agreed to Kevin's expansion plan without discussing it with me first. You were busy with the audit, he'd said. I didn't want to bother you with operational stuff. Operational stuff. A $3 million expansion that I'd have to figure out how to finance. Or maybe it died Friday night. At Cascade Ridge Lodge. At the retreat where everything fell apart. The changes crept in so gradually I almost didn't notice. First, my inbox got quieter, Archer claiming he was streamlining communication. Then he and Kevin started having these long lunches, always at places with expensive steaks and even more expensive wines. When I questioned a $380 lunch bill, Kevin had acted like I'd accused him of murder. 2 days later, Archer raised Kevin's approval limit from $5,000 to $25,000. Without board approval. Without even telling me. He needs autonomy to do his job effectively, Archer had explained when I'd confronted him. You can't micromanage a VP, Clara. But I wasn't micromanaging. I was doing my job. The board meetings changed too. We had 4 board members, Archer, me, Joseph Frankel from our lead investment firm, and Simone Christoph, Archer's aunt who held the family trust shares. Used to be that I'd present the financials, lead discussions about runway and burn rate, talk through strategic options. Then Archer started presenting my work. He'd take my slides, my analysis, my recommendations, and deliver them himself. Just streamlining the presentation, he'd said. Too many voices confused the message. Joseph had noticed. After one meeting, he'd pulled me aside. You prepared those projections, didn't you? He'd asked. Yes. Thought so. They're excellent. Always are. He'd paused. Make sure Archer remembers who's keeping this ship afloat financially. Vision is great, but cash flow is king. I'd laughed it off. But Joseph's concern had lodged somewhere in my chest. Over the next few months, suspicious payments kept appearing. An $85,000 invoice to Summit Strategic Consulting for services I'd never heard of. $50,000 monthly to Evergreen Solutions, with no deliverables. Every time I asked for documentation, Kevin got defensive and Archer dismissed my concerns. Kevin's handling vendor relationships now, Archer would say. Focus on your assigned duties. Assigned duties. Like I was an employee, not his wife. Not the woman who'd invested her entire savings into this company. Not the CFO who'd kept us afloat when we had $3 in the business account and payroll due. The Thursday before the retreat, I'd been reviewing our Q2 financials when I found another payment to Summit Strategic. $85,000. No contract. No statement of work. No deliverables. Just an invoice and payment, approved by Kevin. I'd walked to Kevin's office. He'd been on his phone, feet up on his desk, laughing. When he saw me, he'd straightened up quickly. What's Summit Strategic Consulting? I'd asked. Market research firm. Southwest Expansion Analysis. I don't have any of their reports. They presented directly to Archer and me. Didn't want to overwhelm you with preliminary stuff. $85,000 isn't preliminary, Kevin. I need documentation. His face had hardened. You know, Clara, sometimes I wonder if you trust anyone. Archer and I have been handling the expansion strategy. Your job is to make sure the numbers work after we make the decisions. After. Not during. After. My job is to ensure financial oversight on all expenditures over $10,000, I'd said. Get me the documentation by Friday. He hadn't. And when I'd mentioned it to Archer that night, he'd been irritated. Can you please not interrogate my VP? Kevin's doing great work. The Southwest deals are going to double our revenue. I'm not interrogating. I'm asking for basic documentation. You're being controlling. Kevin said you made him feel like a criminal. Kevin said. Kevin's version. Always taken at face value. I'm doing my job, Archer. Your job is to back us up, not question everything. That conversation had ended with Archer sleeping in his office that night. Too much work to come home, he'd texted. My mother had called the next day. You sound tired, sweetie. Everything okay? Fine, Mom. Just busy. You've canceled Sunday dinner 3 times. Archer hasn't been in 2 months. I'm your mother. I know when something's wrong. I'd wanted to tell her everything. Instead, I'd said, we're just in a growth phase. It's stressful. Growth phase. Mom had sighed. Your father and I ran a business for 30 years. Know what killed most of our competitors? Not lack of growth. Lack of partnership. When one person starts making all the decisions, the business suffers. And so does the marriage. She'd been right, of course. But I'd been too deep in it to see clearly. The retreat was supposed to fix things. That's what Archer had said when he'd insisted I come. We need to present a united front, he'd explained. The investors, the board members, they all need to see that we're solid. A performance. That's what he'd wanted. A performance of partnership while the actual partnership crumbled. I'd agreed because some stupid, hopeful part of me thought maybe a weekend away would help. Maybe we'd reconnect. I'd even bought a new dress for the cocktail reception. Navy blue, elegant but not flashy. I'd wanted to look like someone who belonged there. Cascade Ridge Lodge had been beautiful. Luxury mountain resort, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Cascades. 40 people total, executives, board members, key investors, their spouses and partners. I'd known something was off within the first hour. The way Kevin had smirked when I'd walked in. The way Archer had introduced me to a new investor. This is my wife, Clara. She handles our books. Handles our books. Like I was a bookkeeper. Not the CFO. Not a board member. But I'd smiled. Played the part. Made small talk while their partners discussed business. It wasn't until the cocktail reception that everything shattered. Archer had been drinking. Not drunk, but loose. Confident in that way that comes from being surrounded by people who think you're successful. He'd been holding court, telling stories, making everyone laugh. Kevin had been beside him, as always. His hype man. His enabler. And then someone, I don't even remember who, had asked about work-life balance. How Archer managed to run a growing company and maintain a marriage. Someone asked Archer about work-life balance, I don't even remember who. But I'll never forget what he said. Honestly? You have to set boundaries. My wife used to try to come to every meeting, weigh in on every decision. I finally had to explain that there's a difference between a company event and a PDA meeting. The room laughed. Not everyone. Simone looked uncomfortable. Joseph went very still with his bourbon halfway to his lips. But enough people laughed. Kevin laughed the loudest, practically doubled over, slapping Archer on the back like he'd just delivered the joke of the century. And I stood there, wine glass in hand, smile frozen on my face, while my husband turned our marriage into a punchline. The laughter felt like it lasted forever. In reality, it was probably 5 seconds. But those 5 seconds rewired something fundamental in my brain. Clara's great with the numbers, though, Archer continued, riding the wave of his successful joke. I always tell people, behind every visionary CEO is a spreadsheet wizard keeping him honest. Spreadsheet wizard. Like I was some quirky character in his success story instead of the reason his vision hadn't bankrupted us 3 years ago. I set down my wine glass on the nearest table with more force than intended. The sharp clink cut through the conversation. A few people glanced over. "Excuse me," I said to no one in particular. "I need some air." I made it to the lodge's exterior deck before my hands started shaking. The mountain air was cold. October in the Cascades doesn't care about your emotional breakdown, but I welcomed it. Needed it. Something real to feel instead of this humiliation spreading through my chest like poison. The deck overlooked a valley of pine trees, the peaks beyond them catching the last of the sunset. It was objectively beautiful. The kind of view that should have made me feel grateful, privileged even, to be here at this luxury retreat celebrating our company's success. Instead, I felt like I was suffocating. My phone buzzed. A text from Simone, "You okay, honey?" I didn't respond. Couldn't trust myself to type anything that wouldn't sound completely unhinged. The deck door opened behind me. I prayed it wasn't Archer. Couldn't handle his casual dismissal right now, his confusion about why I was being sensitive about a joke. It was Kevin. Of course it was Kevin. "Hey," he said, coming to stand beside me at the railing. Too close. Always too close. Hell of a view, right? I said nothing. Listen, Archer didn't mean anything by that comment. You know how he is, he plays to the room. It's part of being a good CEO. Is it? My voice came out flat, emotionless. Being a good CEO means humiliating your CFO in front of investors? Kevin laughed. Actually laughed. Come on, Clara. You're taking it too personally. Everyone knows you're good at your job. That's not in question. Then what is in question, Kevin? He turned to face me, leaning against the railing with that casual confidence that had always irritated me. Look, I'm going to be straight with you because someone needs to be. You've been great for getting the company to this point. But we're entering a new phase now. Scaling up requires different skills. More vision. Less micromanagement. Micromanagement. There it was again. Wanting documentation for six-figure expenditures isn't micromanagement, I said. It's called fiduciary responsibility. See, that right there. Kevin gestured at me like I'd just proved his point. That attitude. It's slowing us down. Archer and I are trying to move fast, disrupt the market, and you're asking for receipts like we're expensing lunch. I'm asking for receipts because it's literally my job to ensure. To ensure what? That we don't take risks? That we don't innovate? Kevin's voice had an edge now. The companies that win are the ones willing to bend the rules a little. Move fast and break things, right? Move fast and commit fraud, you mean? The words were out before I could stop them. Kevin's expression changed instantly, the friendly facade dropping like a mask. Be very careful what you're implying, he said quietly. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating a fact. Summit Strategic Consulting, $85,000 for reports that don't exist. Evergreen Solutions, $50,000 monthly for consulting services I can't verify. Pacific Rim Advisory Group. Those are all legitimate vendors providing valuable services, Kevin interrupted. Just because you're not in the loop doesn't mean. Then loop me in. Show me the contracts. Show me the deliverables. Show me anything that proves these aren't just inflated invoices to companies you control. Kevin stepped closer. Not threatening exactly, but definitely invading my space. You know what your problem is, Clara? You can't handle that you're not the most important person in the room anymore. Archer's outgrown you. The company's outgrown you. And instead of accepting that gracefully, you're making accusations. Get away from me, I said. Or what? You'll go crying to Archer? Kevin smiled. He's not going to take your side, Clara. He never does anymore. Haven't you noticed? He was right. God help me, he was right, and we both knew it. Kevin straightened up, adjusting his suit jacket. Do yourself a favor. Stop fighting the inevitable. Archer and I are taking this company to the next level. You can either support that, or you can get left behind. Your choice. He walked back inside, leaving me alone on the deck with the mountain view and the crushing realization that my marriage and my career were simultaneously imploding. I stayed out there for another 20 minutes, until the cold had seeped through my dress and I couldn't feel my fingers. When I finally went back inside, the cocktail reception had moved into the dining room for dinner. I found my assigned seat, notably not next to Archer, who was at the head table with Kevin and the major investors. I was placed at a side table with other spouses and junior staff members. The seating chart told me everything I needed to know about my current status in Archer's world. Dinner was torture. 4 courses of beautifully prepared food that tasted like ash in my mouth. Conversations swirling around me about vacation homes and private schools and which Napa wineries were authentic versus touristy. I smiled and nodded and said the right things while my mind spun. Summit Strategic. Evergreen Solutions. Pacific Rim Advisory Group. Kevin's defensive reaction when I'd pushed for documentation. Archer's immediate dismissal of my concerns. The pattern of increased spending with decreased oversight. I pulled out my phone under the table and opened our company's financial software. I had full access, still, at least. Kevin couldn't lock me out without board approval, and I was on the board. I started searching vendor names, cross-referencing payment dates, pulling up invoices. The more I looked, the more the pattern emerged. Regular payments. Round numbers. Generic service descriptions. All approved by Kevin. All adding up to far more than I'd initially suspected. My phone buzzed with a text from Archer. Where are you? I looked up. He was staring at me from the head table, frowning. I'd apparently missed some toast or announcement. At my assigned table, I texted back. The one for people who aren't important. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then, we'll talk later. We'll talk later. The 4 words every woman loves to hear when she's already angry. I didn't stay for dessert. Pleaded a headache, which wasn't entirely a lie, my skull was pounding, and went back to our room. The luxury suite Archer had booked, with its king bed and mountain views and complimentary champagne. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at the desk with my laptop, pulling every financial record I could access remotely, building spreadsheets, tracking patterns. By 3 a.m., I had a preliminary analysis. Approximately $3.2 million in suspicious payments over the past 18 months to vendors I couldn't verify. By 5 a.m., I'd identified at least 6 shell companies that all shared similar characteristics: Delaware Incorporation, registered agent addresses at mail forwarding services, no websites beyond basic landing pages, no staff listed on LinkedIn. By 6 a.m., when Archer finally stumbled into the room from wherever he'd been drinking with Kevin, I had enough evidence to know that my husband's best friend was stealing from us. And that my husband was either complicit or dangerously negligent. You're up early, Archer mumbled, heading straight for the bathroom. Couldn't sleep, I said. Still mad about the joke? He paused at the bathroom door. Clara, seriously, you need to develop a thicker skin. You can't take everything so personally in business. It wasn't business, Archer. It was personal. You made it personal when you humiliated me in front of 40 people. I didn't humiliate you. I made a light-hearted comment. You're being dramatic. Dramatic. There was that word. The one men used when women had legitimate reactions to being disrespected. We're leaving, I said. What? The retreat isn't over until tomorrow afternoon. We have the strategy session, Anne. I'm leaving. You can stay if you want. I started packing my bag. Archer stood in the bathroom doorway, confusion giving way to irritation. This is exactly the kind of behavior I was talking about, he said. You can't just leave in the middle of a company retreat because your feelings are hurt. Watch me. I'd called a car service. Paid for it with my personal card. I wasn't putting another dollar on the company account until I understood where our money was actually going. The 2-hour drive back to Portland was silent except for the driver's occasional attempts at small talk that I shut down with polite but firm responses. I'd gone straight home, fed Pepper, and started making calls. Saturday felt like drowning in slow motion. I spent it in a fog, not quite crying, not quite functioning. Just existing in this strange space between who I'd been Friday morning and whoever I was becoming. Pepper followed me everywhere. Smart dog. Every surface held memories that had curdled overnight. The kitchen island where we'd celebrated our series of funding. The couch where we'd brainstormed company names. The bedroom where we'd promised success would never change us. My phone kept buzzing. Text after text from Archer. Where did you go? This is embarrassing. People are asking. You're making me look bad. Making him look bad. Not, are you okay? Just concern about appearances. I turned my phone off. Around 3 p.m., I took a sleeping pill and went to bed. Not because I was tired, but because being awake hurt too much. I woke up at 10 p.m. disoriented. Pepper was on the bed beside me. My pillow was damp, apparently I'd been crying in my sleep. I turned my phone back on. 17 missed calls. 12 texts. I didn't check any of them. Instead, I stood at the kitchen window looking out at Portland's downtown lights. Somewhere out there, Archer was probably still at the retreat, networking and playing CEO. Probably telling more jokes about his wife who didn't understand business. When had I become this person? When had I accepted being diminished, dismissed, decorated like furniture in someone else's success story? I thought about my mother. She'd run an accounting firm with my father for 30 years. Equal partners in every sense. Never let a man take credit for your work, she'd told me once. Not out of malice, not out of habit, not out of love. The moment you accept being invisible, you start disappearing. I'd been disappearing for 2 years. My laptop was still on the coffee table. I opened it. The financial records were still there. Still damning. Still waiting. I started a new spreadsheet, methodically documenting every suspicious transaction. Date, amount, vendor name, invoice number, approval signature. All Kevin. Every single one. Around midnight, I found something interesting. One of the shell companies, Evergreen Solutions, had made a mistake on an invoice. The payment details included account information that was supposed to be redacted, but someone had done a sloppy job. I pulled up Kevin's expense reports. The account numbers matched. Kevin wasn't even smart enough to use different banks. I took a screenshot. Added it to a folder I titled Evidence. Then I just sat there, feeling the weight of what I knew. My marriage was over. That was clear now. You don't come back from your husband choosing his friend over you, from him humiliating you publicly, from him dismissing your concerns until they became catastrophes. But the company? That was more complicated. Harlan Technologies was as much mine as his. Maybe more. I'd built the financial foundation. I'd secured the funding. I'd kept us alive through the lean years. I'd be damned if I'd let Kevin Abernathy steal it and Archer Harlan mismanage it into the ground. I pulled up email and started typing. Professor Dalton. I hope you remember me, Clara from your Advanced Financial Analysis class, Fall 2015. I need your help with something urgent. I've discovered what I believe to be systematic embezzlement at my company, and I need someone who knows how to properly document this for legal purposes. Can we meet Monday morning? Clara Harlan, née Moreno, CFO, Harlan Technologies. I hit send before I could second guess myself. Then I searched for, divorce attorney Portland high net worth. Typing those words at 1:45 a.m. while my husband celebrated at a luxury retreat felt like crossing a bridge that would burn behind me. I started reading reviews. One name kept appearing, Patricia Vance. Ruthless but fair. Got me everything I deserved. She doesn't just win, she obliterates. I drafted another email. Ms. Vance. I need a divorce lawyer who can handle complicated business assets. My husband is the CEO of a tech company we founded together. I serve as CFO and hold a board seat. I've recently discovered evidence of embezzlement by his business partner, and I believe my husband has been negligent in his oversight. Can we meet Monday? Clara Harlan. I hit send. Then I closed my laptop, turned off all the lights, and sat in the dark with Pepper, watching the city lights blur through tears. By morning, I'd have responses. By Monday, I'd have allies. By the time Archer came home expecting an apology, I'd have a plan. But right now, I let myself grieve. Not for the marriage, that had been dying for 2 years. But for the version of myself who'd believed that love and loyalty were enough. That version of me was gone. What came next would be harder, sharper, less forgiving. But at least it would be honest. Sunday morning, I woke up at 6 a.m. with perfect clarity. The grief was gone, burned away by something hotter and cleaner. Rage. Not the messy, screaming kind. The cold, calculating kind that made my hands steady and my mind sharp. I made coffee and opened my laptop. 2 emails waiting. The first was from Richard Dalton, sent at 5:47 a.m. Clara. Of course I remember you. You were one of the best students I ever taught, and I don't say that lightly. I'm intrigued and concerned by your message. I can meet you tomorrow, Monday, at 8 a.m. at my office if that works. Bring everything you have. One piece of advice, don't tell anyone you're looking into this. Not your husband, not HR, not even people you trust. If there's real fraud happening, you need to maintain the element of surprise. See you tomorrow. Richard Dalton. The second was from Patricia Vance, sent at 7:12 a.m. on a Sunday. Clara. Your situation is exactly the type of case my firm specializes in. I had a cancellation Monday at 10 a.m. if you can make it. Bring any financial documents you have access to, your marriage certificate, and a list of all jointly held assets. We'll need to move quickly if your husband has access to company accounts. Also, stop using joint credit cards, joint accounts, or any shared financial resources immediately. Pay for everything from personal accounts only. See you Monday. Patricia Vance, ESQ. I looked at Pepper, who was watching me with those intelligent brown eyes. We're going to war, girl. She wagged her tail. I spent Sunday morning doing what I do best, following the money. I created a master spreadsheet with tabs for each suspicious vendor. For each one, I documented incorporation date and state, registered agent, payment history, stated services, actual deliverables, and approval chain. The pattern was beautiful in its simplicity and damning in its consistency. All 6 shell companies had been incorporated in Delaware within a 3-month period, 18 months ago. All used the same registered agent service. All had generic names: Summit Strategic Consulting, Evergreen Solutions, Pacific Rim Advisory Group, Apex Business Partners, Meridian Ventures, and Cascade Development Group. Cascade. That one made me laugh bitterly. Kevin had named one of his fraud vehicles after the mountain range where Archer had just humiliated me. The payments followed a pattern: $40,000 to $85,000 per invoice, always round numbers, always approved by Kevin, always with vague descriptions like consulting services or strategic analysis. Around noon, I did something I'd never done before. I cross-referenced Kevin's personal banking information from his expense reports with the wire transfer details. Bingo. Kevin's personal checking account and Summit Strategic's receiving account had matching numbers. He was literally paying himself from the company account. I screenshotted everything, saved it to an encrypted cloud drive, and emailed copies to my personal email address. My phone rang. Archer. I let it go to voicemail. Around 2 p.m., my mother called. I actually answered. Clara? Sweetheart, I've been worried. You said you'd come for dinner today. I'd completely forgotten. Sunday dinner. I'm sorry, Mom. I got caught up in something. Something or someone? Her voice sharpened. You sound different. What happened? That's the thing about mothers, they always know. Archer and I are getting divorced, I said. The first time I'd said it out loud. Silence. Then, I'll make pot roast. Come over now. Mom, I have work to do. Clara Marie Moreno Harlan, get in your car and come to your mother's house right now. Whatever you're doing can wait 2 hours. She used my full name. She wasn't asking. I went. Mom's house in Beaverton smelled like home, pot roast, fresh bread, and the lavender candles she burned constantly. She took one look at me, pulled me into a hug, and said, "Tell me everything." So I did. The retreat, the humiliation, Kevin's fraud, Archer's dismissiveness, all of it. When I finished, she turned off the stove and sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd done homework as a kid, where Dad had taught me about compound interest. Your father would be proud of you, she said quietly. For getting divorced? For fighting back? For refusing to be diminished? She reached across and took my hand. But Clara, you need to understand something. When you go to war with your husband, especially in business, you need to be prepared to win completely. Half measures will destroy you. I know. Do you? Because divorce is one thing. Exposing Kevin's fraud is another. Taking control of the company is something else entirely. You're talking about burning down everything you built together. He burned it down first, Mom. I'm just refusing to die in the fire. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. Then you need to be smart about this. What's your strategy? I laid it out: meet with Richard tomorrow to verify the fraud, meet with Patricia to start divorce proceedings, gather enough evidence to present to the board. And what about the shares? Mom asked. How much do you own? 12% directly. Archer has 39%. Kevin has 5%. The rest is split between investors and Archer's Aunt Simone's family trust. Simone's trust. Mom's eyes narrowed. Archer's mother's family money, right? The Kristoffs? Yeah. They hold 49% through the trust. Archer's been treating it like it's his personal safety net, but technically it's controlled by Simone as trustee. Have you read the trust documents? I blinked. Why would I? Because you're a CFO, and family trusts with that much money always have provisions. Conditions for distribution, sale clauses, protective triggers. Mom stood up and walked to her study, returning with a legal pad. Who drafted those documents? Some law firm in Seattle. Morrison and Chin, I think. Mom wrote that down. Call them tomorrow. Request a copy of the trust documents for corporate records. You're entitled to them as a board member. And Clara? Read every word. Mom, I don't see how. Just trust me. Your father's family trust had a clause that allowed early dissolution if certain conditions were met. It saved his sister when her husband tried to steal the business. Family trusts from old money always have escape hatches. I stared at her. My mother, the accountant who'd spent 30 years doing small business taxes, was thinking 3 steps ahead of me. When did you get so devious? I asked. The day your father's brother tried to screw us out of our share of their father's estate. I learned that family and business make people do terrible things. You prepare for the worst and hope for the best. She squeezed my hand. Now eat. You look like you haven't had a real meal in days. Over pot roast and roasted vegetables, Mom told me stories I'd never heard. About clients who'd tried to cheat her, about the time Dad's business partner had attempted to push her out. What happened? I asked. I buried him with documentation. He'd been embezzling, not much, just enough to think he'd get away with it. I presented the evidence to your father, and the partner was gone within a week. She smiled grimly. The satisfaction wasn't in destroying him. It was in building something better after he was gone. I drove home as the sun was setting, my trunk loaded with leftover pot roast and my mind loaded with strategy. 3 missed calls from Archer and 1 voicemail. I played it on speaker while feeding Pepper. Clara, this is getting ridiculous. I'm back in Portland. We need to talk about your behavior this weekend. I'll be home around 7 tomorrow. Be there. Your behavior. Be there. Like I was a child being called to the principal's office. I smiled, deleted the voicemail, and opened my laptop. Time to read some trust documents. Monday morning, 7:45 a.m. I sat in my car outside Richard Dalton's office in downtown Portland, 3 cups of coffee deep and running on pure strategic fury. I'd been up until 3 a.m. reading trust documents. Mom had been right, there were escape hatches. Richard's office was in a renovated warehouse in the Pearl District. His firm occupied the 3rd floor, Dalton Financial Forensics. Richard appeared in the doorway. He looked exactly the same as 7 years ago, wire-rimmed glasses, Portland State hoodie under a blazer. Clara. Come in. His office was organized chaos. Whiteboards covered with equations, file boxes stacked precisely, 3 monitors showing different spreadsheets. You look like you did before finals, he said. Determined and slightly terrifying. I found something bad, Richard. Really bad. Show me. I walked him through everything. The shell companies, the payment patterns, Kevin's matching account numbers, the lack of contracts or deliverables. Richard didn't interrupt. Just took notes. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. This is textbook embezzlement, like, they teach this pattern in forensic accounting courses. He pulled up one of his monitors. The matching account numbers are the smoking gun, but let's dig deeper. 90 minutes later, we had the full picture. Not $4.7 million like I'd thought. $6.2 million. Kevin had been stealing for longer than I'd realized, and he'd gotten greedier over time. Started with $30,000 payments. Ended with $85,000. Classic pattern, they get comfortable, think they won't get caught, Richard noted. Can you testify to this? I asked. I can do better than testify. I can write a report that will make the FBI very interested. He looked at me over his glasses. Clara, this is wire fraud, possibly money laundering. Federal crimes. Are you prepared for where this goes? Kevin's been stealing while convincing my husband I'm the problem. Yeah, I'm prepared. Richard nodded slowly. What about Archer? Did he know? I don't think so. I think he's guilty of negligence. He wanted to trust Kevin so badly he ignored every red flag. Negligence is still a breach of fiduciary duty. Richard pulled up another screen showing an approval timeline. Look at this pattern. For the first 6 months, Archer occasionally questioned invoices. Then, about 20 months ago, the questions stopped completely. What happened 20 months ago? I thought back. The Series B funding. We closed $12 million. Archer was traveling constantly, doing press, building his profile. And Kevin positioned himself as the person handling operational details while Archer was out being the visionary. Classic control shift. The fraud probably started small, then exploded when there was more money and less oversight. My phone buzzed. Patricia's office, running 10 minutes late. See you at 10:10. I have a divorce attorney meeting at 10, I told Richard. Good. You'll need one. He printed several documents. Take these. Preliminary analyses. I'll have a complete forensic report by Wednesday. And Clara? Once you show this to your attorney, the clock starts ticking. I'm telling Archer tonight. He's expecting me to apologize. Instead, I'm serving him divorce papers and showing him his best friend is a thief. Richard almost smiled. Check your company's bylaws. There might be provisions about fiduciary breaches. I pulled up our corporate documents. I'd helped draft these 6 years ago but hadn't looked at them in years. There. Section 7.3. In the event of discovered financial malfeasance by any officer or director, any board member may call an emergency meeting with 24 hours notice. And Section 8.2. Any controlling shareholder found to have enabled or ignored fiduciary breaches may be subject to dilution of voting rights at board discretion. Richard, I said slowly. I think I found something. He read over my shoulder. Corporate death penalty. You could strip Archer's voting rights if the board determines he was negligent. But you'd need board support. 4 members. Me, Archer, Joseph Frankel from our lead investor, and Simone Christoph who holds the family trust. I think I can get Joseph and Simone if I present the evidence right. Richard handed me a folder thick with printouts. Then you've got your case. Documentation of fraud, corporate bylaws that give you recourse, and a path to majority control if you can flip the board. There's one more thing. I pulled up the Christoph family trust documents. This trust holds 49% of company shares. Look at this clause I found at 2 a.m., buried on page 47. In the event that the company experiences material fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, or gross negligence by controlling shareholders, the trustee may, at their discretion, offer to sell all or part of the trust's holdings to any board member at the valuation established in Appendix C. Richard's eyes widened. That's a forced sale provision. If Simone determines there's been gross negligence, she can sell you 49% at a discount. Combined with your 12%, that's 61%. You'd be the majority shareholder. You could fire Archer. I could restructure everything. Turn this into my company. We sat there for a moment, the weight of it settling. Clara, Richard said carefully, this is nuclear. You're talking about taking your husband's company. Not just divorcing him, taking the thing he's built his entire identity around. He didn't build it. We built it. And he's been so busy playing CEO that he let his best friend rob us and his wife become invisible. I stood up, gathering the documents. He made his choices. Now I'm making mine. Richard stood too. You were always my best student. Not because you were good with numbers, plenty of people are good with numbers. But because you understood that numbers tell stories about people. Thanks, Richard. One more thing. He pulled a business card from his desk. FBI agent I work with. Special Agent Catherine Monroe. She specializes in corporate fraud. When you're ready to bring in the feds, call her. I took the card and headed to my car. 2 hours ago, I'd been a wronged wife. Now I was building a case that would destroy my husband's career, send his best friend to prison, and give me control of a multi-million-dollar company. The old Clara would have felt guilty. The new Clara just felt efficient. Patricia Vance's office was in a glass tower downtown with views of the Willamette River. Corner office, all white marble and leather furniture. Patricia herself was exactly what I'd expected, mid-40s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, and an expression that suggested she'd heard every excuse and believed none of them. Clara. Sit. I sat. She opened a folder, my email, printed and annotated. CEO husband, company you co-founded, embezzlement by his VP, and you want out. Am I missing anything? I want the company too. Patricia's eyebrow rose. Explain. I walked her through everything. The retreat humiliation, Kevin's fraud, the trust provisions, the corporate bylaws, my plan to flip the board and force a stock sale. When I finished, Patricia leaned back and actually smiled. You came here thinking you needed a divorce attorney. What you actually need is a corporate attorney who specializes in hostile takeovers. Lucky for you, I'm both. She pulled out a legal pad. Here's what we're going to do. First, we filed divorce papers today, irreconcilable differences, no fault. Clean and simple. That's your insurance policy. Okay. Second, we prepare a stock purchase agreement for the Christoph Trust shares. I'll draft it today, ready to execute the moment Simone agrees. We'll use Richard's analysis as justification. She might not agree. She will when I explain that she could be personally liable if she knowingly allows fraud to continue. Trustees have fiduciary duties too. Patricia made another note. Third, you need to secure board votes before you confront Archer. Talk to Joseph and Simone privately today, show them the evidence, get their commitment. When? This afternoon. Before Archer gets home. She looked at me over her reading glasses. You said he's expecting you at 7? Yes. Perfect. By the time he walks in that door, you'll have divorce papers, a stock purchase agreement, board support, and documentation of fraud. He'll think he's coming home to an apology. Instead, he's walking into a corporate coup. The way she said it, so matter of fact, made it real. There's no going back from this, I said. No, there's not. So I'll ask you one time, and I need you to be honest, is this what you want? Not revenge, anyone can want revenge. I mean, do you actually want to run this company? I thought about my mother's words. The satisfaction wasn't in destroying him. It was in building something better after he was gone. Yes, I said. I want it. I built the financial foundation. I kept us profitable. I did the work while Archer played CEO. It's time I got credit for it. Patricia nodded. Good. Then let's get started. We spent the next hour drafting documents. Divorce papers were surprisingly simple. Oregon was no fault, no kids, mostly about asset division. The stock purchase agreement was more complex. It laid out the terms, would purchase 49% from the Kristoff family trust at approximately $3.8 million based on our last funding round. You'll be taking on debt, Patricia warned. Nearly $4 million. Can you handle that? The company's profitable. I can structure a buyout that pays for itself through dividends and salary. I ran quick calculations. It'll be tight for a year, but manageable. You sound like a CFO. I am a CFO. That's the problem, everyone keeps forgetting that. By 1 p.m., we had everything drafted and notarized. Red folder is divorce papers. Blue folder is stock purchase agreement and supporting documents. Don't mix them up. Patricia walked me to the door. Call me after you talk to Joseph and Simone. And Clara? When you confront Archer tonight, record it. Oregon is one-party consent. You don't need his permission. You think he'll say something incriminating? I think men like your husband always do. They can't help themselves, they need you to understand why they were right. Let him explain. You might learn something useful. I left at 1:30 p.m. with 2 folders that represented the end of my marriage and the beginning of something else. Joseph Frankel agreed to meet me at 2 p.m. at a coffee shop in the Alberta Arts District. He showed up in khakis and a polo shirt with his VC firm's logo. Clara. What's this about? I slid Richard's analysis across the table. Kevin Abernathy has been stealing from us for 2 years. $6.2 million through shell companies. Archer's been approving the payments without oversight. Joseph's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. He set it down, picked up the documents, and started reading. His face cycled through shock, anger, and resignation. Son of a bitch, he said quietly. I knew something was off. The burn rate didn't match the headcount. But $6.2 million? Conservatively. Does Archer know? Not yet. I'm telling him tonight. I pulled out the blue folder. Joseph, I need your support. The trust provisions allow Simone to sell her shares if there's been gross negligence. I want to invoke that clause and buy her out. Joseph read through the stock purchase agreement, eyes widening. You're taking over the company. I'm taking control before Kevin's fraud destroys everything we built. Archer's been negligent. Kevin's a criminal. Someone needs to fix this. And that someone is you? I'm the only one who saw it coming. The only one who did the work to document it. The only one who actually understands our financials. I leaned forward. Joseph, you've been worried about oversight for months. You knew something was wrong. This is what was wrong. He sat back, processing. If we invoke the trust clause and you buy Simone out, you'd have 61%. Controlling interest. Yes. You could fire Archer. Yes. Jesus, Clara. I know. He stared at the river through the window. Long silence. Then, what do you need from me? Board vote. Emergency meeting tomorrow morning. Vote to suspend Kevin pending investigation. Vote to acknowledge Archer's negligence. Vote to approve my stock purchase. That's 3 votes out of 4. You'd need Simone too. I'm meeting her at 4. Joseph smiled grimly. You've thought this through. I'm a CFO. It's what I do. He extended his hand. You have my vote. About damn time someone held Archer accountable. 1 down. Simone Kristoff agreed to meet me at her home in the West Hills, Old Portland Money, historic house with views of downtown and Mount Hood. She answered the door in casual elegance. Clara, dear. Come in. This is about Archer, I assume. And Kevin. Her expression tightened. She led me to a sitting room with antique furniture and family photos spanning generations. I laid out everything. The fraud, the evidence, the trust provisions, the stock purchase proposal. Simone read through the documents with careful attention. When she finished, she set them down and looked at me with sad, knowing eyes. I was afraid of something like this, she said. Kevin always reminded me of my second husband, charming, ambitious, and fundamentally dishonest. Your second husband? Embezzled from my family's business 30 years ago. Nearly bankrupted us. That's why I insisted on those protective clauses when I set up Archer's trust. I've seen this story before. So you'll support the sale? On one condition. She folded her hands. I want assurance that you'll run this company with integrity. That you won't become what Archer became, too proud to listen, too ambitious to care about the people around you. I promise. Don't promise, dear. Show me. Build something better. Honor the Kristoff name properly. She stood. I'll sign your agreement. Call my attorney tomorrow to finalize details. And Clara? What you did at that retreat, leaving, that took courage. Most women would have stayed and smiled through it. I'm done smiling through things. Good. The world has enough polite women. It needs more honest ones. I left Simone's house at 5:30 p.m. with everything I needed, board support, a stock purchase agreement, and divorce papers. All that was left was the confrontation itself. I stopped at home to feed Pepper and change clothes. Black slacks and a silk blouse, the outfit I'd worn when we'd pitched our Series B investors. Then I set my phone to record audio, placed Richard's analysis and both folders on the kitchen island, and poured 2 glasses of Archer's favorite scotch. At 6:58 p.m., I heard his key in the lock. Showtime. Archer walked in looking tired but satisfied, like someone who'd successfully navigated a challenging weekend. Designer jeans, cashmere sweater, the Patagonia vest every tech CEO seemed to own. Clara. He set his bag down. I'm glad you're here. We need to talk about what happened. We do. I gestured to the living room. I made us drinks. He looked surprised but pleased. That's good. I appreciate you being reasonable. Reasonable. That word again. He settled into his usual spot on the couch. I sat across from him where I could see his face clearly, where my phone would pick up every word. Look, Archer started, I know the retreat got tense. But you have to understand. Actually, I need you to understand something first. I kept my voice calm. Before we talk about my behavior, I want to show you what I've been working on this weekend. Clara, I don't think now is the time. Humor me. 5 minutes. He sighed but nodded. I pulled out my laptop and opened Richard's analysis. I spent the weekend reviewing our financials. Something's been bothering me for months. Our burn rate didn't match our headcount. So I dug deeper. I turned the screen toward him. The first page showed $6.2 million in suspicious payments over 26 months. Archer leaned forward, frowning. What is this? 6 consulting companies that have billed us $6.2 million for services I can't verify. Summit Strategic, Evergreen Solutions, all these official-sounding names. Want to guess how many reports I've actually seen from them? 0. Kevin handles vendor relationships. I know. Every single payment was approved by Kevin. I pulled up the next screen. Here's what's interesting. All 6 companies were incorporated in Delaware within 3 months of each other. All use the same registered agent. All have no website, no staff, no LinkedIn presence. They essentially don't exist. Archer's face shifted from confused to defensive. That doesn't mean anything. Plenty of consulting firms are small. True. So I looked at the banking information. I showed him the account analysis. This is Kevin's personal checking account from his expense reports. And this is the receiving account for Summit Strategic Consulting. Same account numbers. The blood drained from his face. There must be an explanation. There is. Kevin's been stealing from us. He created shell companies, submitted fake invoices, and you approved every single payment without question because he's your best friend. This can't be right. Kevin wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Wouldn't steal? Wouldn't lie? I pulled up more screens. I had a forensic accountant verify everything. This is wire fraud, Archer. Federal crime. $6.2 million stolen while you were too busy building your brand to notice. Archer stood abruptly, pacing to the window. We need to talk to Kevin. There has to be an explanation. Maybe he was using those companies for legitimate. What legitimate purposes? Name one deliverable. I don't know. I don't track every vendor. His voice rose. That's not my job. I'm the CEO. I focus on vision and strategy, not micromanaging every invoice. You don't have to micromanage. You just have to maintain basic oversight. That's literally your job as CEO. I stayed seated, stayed calm. But you didn't. You approved millions to fake companies because Kevin asked you to. Because I trusted him. Is that a crime? When your best friend is a criminal? Yes, actually. It's called negligent oversight. Archer spun around. You're enjoying this, aren't you? You've been wanting to prove I need you. I don't need to prove anything, Archer. The numbers speak for themselves. I stood, walking to the kitchen island. But since we're talking about things I've been working on, let me show you something else. I picked up the red folder. These are divorce papers. I'm filing tomorrow. The shift in his expression was almost comical, anger to shock to desperate confusion in 2 seconds. Divorce? Clara, come on. We're having a fight. People fight. We can work through this. We're not having a fight. I'm ending our marriage. I set the folder down. You humiliated me in front of 40 people at that retreat. Called me an embarrassment. Made me a joke. And when I left, you didn't ask if I was okay. You asked if I'd learned my lesson. I was angry. I said things I didn't mean. You meant every word. You've been pushing me out for 2 years, Archer. Stopped including me in decisions. Stopped asking my opinion. Started treating me like an employee instead of a partner. The retreat wasn't an exception. It was just the first time you did it publicly. He crossed toward me. Clara, please. I know I've been distracted. The company's grown so fast, I got caught up in the role, but I never stopped loving you. Love isn't enough when there's no respect. And you stopped respecting me the day you decided Kevin's opinion mattered more than mine. That's not fair. Fair? You approved $6.2 million in fraudulent payments because you couldn't be bothered to read the invoices. You fired me from decisions about our own company because I asked for documentation. You made me invisible. My voice stayed steady. And when I tried to warn you about Kevin, you told me I was being controlling. Archer's face crumpled. I made mistakes. I see that now. But we can fix this. Deal with Kevin, restructure the oversight, bring you back into. I'm not interested in being brought back into anything. I'm taking control. I picked up the blue folder. This is a stock purchase agreement. I'm buying the Christoph Trust shares from Simone. All 49%. What? You can't, Simone wouldn't. She already agreed. I met with her this afternoon. I opened the folder. The trust has a protective clause. If there's evidence of fraud or gross negligence by controlling shareholders, the trustee can sell to any board member. You triggered that clause by approving Kevin's fraud. I didn't know about the fraud. Exactly. You didn't know because you didn't do your job. That's the definition of negligence. I walked closer. I'm buying those shares, Archer. Combined with my 12%, that's 61%. I'll be the majority shareholder. And my first act will be firing Kevin and restructuring the executive team. You're firing me. Not a question. A realization. I haven't decided yet. Depends on whether you cooperate with the investigation or obstruct it. He sank onto the couch, head in his hands. This is insane. You're taking everything. I'm taking what I built. You were so busy being the visionary that you forgot who made the vision financially possible. I sat back down. I kept us profitable. I secured the funding. I built the relationships with investors. I did the work while you posed for Forbes photos. That's not fair. Stop saying that. The first crack in my composure. You don't get to tell me what's fair. Fair would have been partnership. Fair would have been respect. Fair would have been my husband having my back instead of making me a punchline. Silence. Archer looked up at me, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years, genuine recognition. I'm sorry, he said quietly. God, Clara, I'm so sorry. I don't know when I became this person. I do. The day you decided appearances were everything. I stood. I'll be staying at my mother's while the divorce processes. My attorney will be in touch. And tomorrow morning, there's an emergency board meeting at 9. Joseph and Simone will be there. I suggest you prepare to answer some very difficult questions. Tomorrow? Clara, that's not enough time. You've had 2 years to notice something was wrong. 24 hours to prepare seems generous. I walked to the bedroom to pack. Archer didn't follow. When I came back with Pepper and a suitcase, he was still on the couch, divorce papers open in front of him, looking like his world had collapsed. Because it had. Clara, he said as I reached the door. Was any of it real? Did you ever really love me? I looked back at him, this man I'd built a life with, who'd promised partnership and delivered betrayal. I loved who you were, I said. I just don't recognize who you became. I walked out, closing the door on 6 years of marriage and 8 years of partnership. By morning, I'd own his company. By next week, I'd have a new life. But right now, driving to my mother's house with Pepper in the passenger seat and evidence of fraud in my laptop bag, I just felt tired. The kind of tired that comes after winning a battle you didn't want to fight in the first place. I slept in my childhood bedroom that night. My phone woke me at 6:47 a.m. 17 missed calls. 23 texts. All from Archer. I didn't read them. Just got up, showered, and put on my best suit, the charcoal Armani I'd worn to close our Series B. Mom was already making coffee and eggs. Did you sleep? Some. Liar. She handed me a plate. Eat. You'll need your strength. The emergency board meeting was at 9 a.m. Patricia had arranged conference room space at her firm, neutral territory with a court reporter. I arrived at 8:45. Patricia was already there, along with Richard, who'd brought complete copies of his forensic analysis. Ready? Patricia asked. No. But let's do it anyway. Joseph arrived at 8:52. Simone at 8:55. Archer at 8:58, eyes bloodshot, suit wrinkled. Kevin wasn't with him. Where's Kevin? Joseph asked. I told him not to come, Archer said quietly. After what Clara showed me, I thought it best. Patricia called the meeting to order at exactly 9 a.m. This emergency session of the Harlan Technologies Board is now in session. Clara Harlan has called this meeting to address urgent matters. I stood. I've discovered evidence of systematic embezzlement by Kevin Abernathy totaling $6.2 million over 26 months. Richard Dalton has verified the findings. I'm requesting 3 votes. First, immediate suspension of Kevin Abernathy. Second, acknowledgement that CEO Archer Harlan's negligence triggers protective provisions in the Kristoff Family Trust. Third, approval of my purchase of the trust's 49% stake. I distributed Richard's reports. The only sound was pages turning. Joseph finished first. This is extensive. Federal wire fraud. Yes, I said. I'm filing with the FBI this afternoon. Archer looked up, face gray. You're bringing in the FBI? Simone set down her report. As trustee, I have a fiduciary obligation to protect these assets. This evidence demonstrates unacceptable risk. She looked at Archer. I'm sorry, nephew. But your negligence has consequences. I didn't know, Archer said weakly. Trust without verification isn't leadership, Joseph said. It's abdication. I vote yes on all 3 motions. As do I, Simone said. Archer? Patricia prompted. You can vote or abstain. Long silence. I abstain. Patricia made a note. 3 votes in favor, 1 abstention. The motions pass. Kevin Abernathy is suspended. The trust protective clause is invoked. Clara Harlan's stock purchase is approved. Just like that, I owned 61% of Harlan Technologies. The meeting adjourned at 9:47 a.m. Joseph left quickly. Simone squeezed my hand. Your mother-in-law would be proud. That left Archer and me. I need to call Kevin, Archer said. No, I said. You're going to call the FBI. Special Agent Catherine Monroe. I slid her card across. You're going to cooperate fully. And then you're going to consider whether you should step down gracefully. You're firing me. Not yet. But if you obstruct this investigation, then yes. He picked up the card. He was my best friend. He was a thief who used your friendship to rob us both. Archer finally looked at me. How long have you known I was failing? About 6 months. That's when you stopped asking my opinion. When you started treating me like I worked for you instead of with you. Why didn't you say something? I did. Dozens of times. You stopped hearing me. I stood. The FBI will want to interview you. Patricia will coordinate. Answer honestly. And Archer? Get a lawyer for the divorce. This is going to get complicated. I walked out. Patricia caught up with me in the hallway. That went well. Cleaner than expected. He's broken, I said. That's why it was easy. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, this is Catherine Monroe, FBI. Richard Dalton referred your case. Can you come to the Portland field office at 2 p.m.? Bring all documentation. I met Special Agent Catherine Monroe at 2 p.m. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe late 30s, with sharp eyes. Miss Harlan. I've reviewed Mr. Dalton's preliminary analysis. This is impressive work. Most victims don't document this thoroughly. I'm a CFO. Numbers are my language. We're going to need everything. Bank records, invoices, incorporation documents, emails. Already compiled. I pulled out a thumb drive. Organized by vendor, date, and transaction type. Catherine's eyebrows rose. You really are a CFO. We spent 2 hours going through evidence. She asked detailed questions about approval processes, Kevin's access, Archer's oversight. At one point, she stepped out to brief her supervisor. When she returned, she had 2 more agents. Ms. Harlan, we're opening a formal investigation into Kevin Abernathy for wire fraud and money laundering. We'll need to interview you officially, probably multiple times. We'll also need to interview your husband. Whatever you need. One more question. How did your husband react when you showed him this evidence? I thought about Archer's face. He was shocked. Disbelieving at first, then devastated. I think he genuinely didn't know. But he was negligent. Catastrophically. Catherine nodded. We'll determine whether that negligence crosses into criminal culpability. For now, we'll focus on Mr. Abernathy. She handed me her card. Don't discuss this investigation with anyone except your attorney. And Ms. Harlan? You might want to prepare for Mr. Abernathy to contact you. They usually try to make deals. If he calls, I'm not interested. I left the FBI field office at 4:37 p.m. feeling lighter and heavier. Lighter because I'd handed the criminal case to professionals. Heavier because this was really happening. My phone rang as I reached my car. Kevin. I let it go to voicemail, then listened on speaker. Clara. We need to talk. Archer told me what's happening. This is all a misunderstanding. Those companies, I can explain everything. Please. I deleted it. Some explanations aren't worth hearing. Kevin was arrested on a Friday morning, 6 days after the board meeting. The FBI executed a warrant at his apartment at 6 a.m. By 7:30, footage of him in handcuffs was all over local news. I was at my mother's kitchen table when the alert popped up. How do you feel? Mom asked. Empty, I admitted. I thought I'd feel vindicated. But I just feel done. The press picked up the story by noon. Tech VP arrested in $6.2 million embezzlement scheme. By evening, CEO's wife uncovers massive fraud, takes control of company. My phone exploded. I ignored all of it. Kevin's arraignment was the following Monday. Patricia attended, I stayed away. She called afterward. He pleaded not guilty. His attorney's talking about authorized business expenses. It won't work, but he's going to fight. How long until trial? Could be a year. But the prosecutor's confident. The divorce proceedings moved faster. Archer didn't contest anything. Just signed with hollow-eyed compliance. The stock purchase closed 3 weeks after the board meeting. I borrowed $3.8 million from an investment bank, secured against future earnings. The trust transferred 49% to me. Combined with my 12%, I now own 61%. The paperwork was finalized on a Wednesday. When the final document was signed, Simone shook my hand. You're the majority shareholder. What's your first move? Board meeting tomorrow. We need to restructure. That board meeting was short but consequential. 4 items: formal termination of Kevin, restructuring of financial controls, executive compensation review, and CEO transition. Archer, I said, looking across the table. You have a choice. Resign as CEO and stay on as Chief Technology Officer, what you're actually good at. Or fight this, and I'll remove you entirely. Silence. Archer looked older. The confidence had evaporated. "I'll take CTO," he said quietly. "It's what I should have been all along." "Good. I'll take over as CEO effective immediately." Joseph raised his hand. "All in favor of Clara Harlan as CEO?" 3 hands went up. Archer abstained. Just like that, I was the CEO. The press release went out that afternoon. Harlan Technologies announces leadership transition. Clara Harlan, co-founder and CFO, assumes role of Chief Executive Officer. Archer Harlan transitions to Chief Technology Officer. Carefully worded. No mention of fraud or divorce. Just clean, professional transition. The tech press had a field day anyway. Some portrayed me as a hero. Others as a calculating opportunist. I didn't read most of it. What mattered was the company survived. 3 months after I took over, Kevin's trial date was set for the following spring. The prosecutor told Catherine they'd likely push for a plea deal. "Wire fraud carries 20 years maximum," Catherine told me. "With the amount involved, we're looking at 8 to 10 years if he goes to trial." "They'll deal." "What kind of deal?" "Probably 5 to 6 years, full restitution, lifetime ban from financial services." 5 years. Kevin would be 38 when he got out. His MBA, his tech career, his reputation, all gone. I called it consequences. My divorce from Archer was finalized 4 months after I'd served him papers. No contested assets, company shares had been handled separately, personal finances were mostly separate. The apartment went to him. The last time I saw Archer as my husband was at the final hearing. When it was over, Archer caught up with me in the hallway. "Clara, I just want you to know, I'm sorry. For all of it." "I know. Do you think we could have fixed it? If I'd listened earlier?" "I thought about that. Maybe. But we'll never know. And that's on you." I walked away. Didn't look back. Some doors, once closed, should stay that way. 8 months after taking over as CEO, I stood in our new office space in the South Waterfront District. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Willamette River, open floor plan, and a culture I was building from scratch. We'd moved out of the Pearl District. Too many ghosts. The first thing I'd done was address the entire company. 63 employees, all uncertain. "I know the past few months have been chaotic," I'd said. "You've watched leadership implode, seen arrests, read speculation. So let me be clear, what happens next is we build something better." I'd laid out my vision. Financial transparency, monthly all-hands where I'd share real numbers. Merit-based advancement, no more jobs for friends. Work-life balance, no more performative overwork. And accountability at every level. "I'm going to make mistakes," I'd told them. "When I do, call me on it." This company almost died because people were afraid to question leadership. That ends now. We lost some people, 3 Kevin loyalists, a handful who preferred the old chaos. But we gained more than we lost. Jennifer, whose work Kevin had stolen credit for, became our new controller. Tom from engineering became VP of product development. Kelly from reception became my executive assistant. I promoted based on competence, not connections. Revenue grew. Turns out, when you're not hemorrhaging $6 million to fraud, profit margins improve. We landed 2 major contracts in my first quarter, companies impressed by our transparency. By month 6, we were profitable enough that I gave every employee a $2,000 bonus. Not huge, but enough to say thank you. The tech press noticed. Harlan Technologies posts record quarter under new leadership. Better headlines than the divorce coverage. My personal life rebuilt itself slowly. I bought a small house in Selwood, just a 2-bedroom craftsman with a yard for Pepper and a home office. Sunday dinners with Mom became sacred again. Every week. Sometimes just us, sometimes with my sister Emma and her family. Normal, grounding, necessary. I dated occasionally. Nothing serious. But coffee dates, casual dinners, reminders that I was still a person outside the CEO role. One of those coffee dates was with David Chin, the entrepreneur Mom had introduced me to. He ran a sustainable packaging company and understood rebuilding after betrayal. How do you trust again? I asked him over coffee. After someone you trusted completely destroys that? You don't trust the same way, he said. You trust smarter. With boundaries, with verification, with your eyes open. He smiled. But you do trust again. Otherwise, you're just surviving, not living. We started seeing each other regularly. Nothing rushed. Just two people who'd been through fires, taking their time, building something careful and real. The tech community noticed. Clara Harlan's comeback, from betrayal to balance. I hated that they made it a story, but I understood. People wanted to believe you could survive devastation and come out whole. So I let them tell it. If my story helped someone else find courage to fight back, to rebuild, to refuse to be diminished, that mattered more than privacy. Archer stayed on as CTO, working remotely. We interacted professionally when necessary, product decisions, board meetings. But the personal connection was gone. He'd started therapy, I'd heard. Working on understanding how he'd lost himself in the CEO role. Good for him. Growth was possible, even after failure. But it wasn't my job to witness his growth anymore. My job was leading this company, building this culture, creating something that would outlast the scandal. And some days, that felt like enough. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.